All right. So I guess I'll go ahead and take over, even though I know Mary's just the hostess with the mostest. I'll go ahead and try to hold a candle to that. Yeah, so welcome everybody to another wonderful Monday community conversation. I'm Lucy with Austin Pets Alive. I'm also on the steering committee for the Maddie's conversations, and I'm joined with Mary here, who needs no introduction. She might as well be Mary's fund or some kind of she's with all the things. And so yeah, so thanks so much for everybody taking time out of their chaotic, intense, unpredictable, hectic schedules to be here and share some space. So yeah, so just going to go ahead and drop in the question of the day. What Valentine's Day promotions are your orgs doing? I've seen a lot of interesting ones on the social medias from the orgs that I follow. Some of them are neutering your ex. Some of them are, finding your perfect match. So yeah, so go ahead and just drop those in the chat. You can go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat as well. And while we go through the talk today, we'll be going ahead and taking down any questions so we can go ahead and answer at the end. So for those of you who are new, that's kind of how the cadence works, to kind of give the space to the folks that are assigned to speak today. And then next, we're going to go ahead and kick it off to Mary, who's going to speak on the January grant announcements from Maddie's.
Thanks, Lucy. Before I do that, I do want to just say that Lucy has been one of my most favorite people for a long time. And she actually gave me the title of my memoir whenever I write it. And that is that part of what we do here is just show up and give a shit.
Keep showing up, keep giving a shit. Absolutely.
That's right.
That's the
And
mantra.
so I've always taken that to heart, and I love the fact that I get to co-host for her today. So I'd like to kick this off to Amber Eby, who's going to announce the January grant winners.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks everyone. I love seeing these Valentine's ideas. I volunteer at Charlie's Acres, which is a sanctuary for animals from the farm industry, and we're going a lot more negative, where at our event there's like pieces of fruit that you can write your ex's name on with an edible marker and then give it to the animals to eat. I love all the positive stuff though, like naming it after your sweetheart. That's so sweet, and finding your forever love. But if you're feeling a little anti-Valentine's Day, you can come support us too. So without further ado, though, I am going to share my screen and we will go over some winners. Can everyone see that okay? Awesome, thank you. So for January 2025, we have our giveaway grant winners. So the first one is the weekly community conversations, and we have one winner of $5,000. And that went to Summer Larkin from Nebraska Humane Society in Omaha, Nebraska. All right, save your applause because we've got a couple more. We have our Maddie's Pet Forum monthly giveaway of $3,000. And that is going to Dr. Tyrone Pierce of the Maryland Hospital. And finally, the last one, our 30th anniversary $1,000 Cuddly Prize Pack giveaway is going to Wendy Montanez Ortez, and that is with Gatos Boruncun in Maryland, or I'm sorry, Franklin, Massachusetts. So congratulations to all of our winners. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Are any of the winners on the call?
Summer.
I am.
Who is? Hey, Summer.
Yes, I'm sorry. I can't get my camera to work.
That is okay. We can hear you, and congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization?
Yeah, so I work at the Nebraska Humane Society in Omaha, Nebraska, and I actually manage our humane education department. So we are actually going to be using all of the grant towards the kids in our education department and getting out into the community to speak at more events in schools.
That is amazing, getting the next generation ready and excited about it. Thank you so much, Summer. Wendy or Dr. Tyler, are you on the call?
I didn't see them.
All right. Well, we will send them our virtual congratulations. Irene has dropped the link in the chat so everyone else can have a chance to win one of our grant giveaways next month. And thank you all so much for all you do.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, everyone. Congratulations.
So amazing. Thank you so much. Always an awesome opportunity every week to earn and learn some stuff and things, to do better and to serve better. Yeah, so next we have the national updates. So if anybody wants to go ahead, you can go ahead. Now's the opportunity to go ahead and share any national updates that you might have. You can drop them in the chat, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and then speak on it. Alina, what do you got for us?
Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Just really quick, given the focus of today's community conversation, I just wanted to let you know that CARE offers the Ready Copper course for animal care and control professionals. I can't stress the timeliness of the material, given the intense fear, suspicious, and even the paralysis that is going on in so many of our communities, and it's understandable. The course is self-paced, about 4.5 hours long. It costs $35 for a 3-year certification. And our courses, there are only revenue generators. And so please know that the funds, they go towards supporting Ready coursework and also our direct care program, which helps struggling families with direct access to veterinary care. So if you'd like more information about our courses, please drop your email in the chat. I'd also like to invite the amazing Mike Bricker, Chief of Animal Care and Protective Services in Jacksonville, and his team to weigh in just for a few minutes. Thank you so much for your time and the space.
Thanks, Dr. Alina.
Thank you, Dr. Luna. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I mean, what Dr. Luna was saying, as far as CARE Copper is concerned, our organization has taken part. Every single one of our officers has taken the course, and they've said some pretty amazing things. I think opening the dialogue is kind of the hardest part when we're talking about, different groups, different people, different personalities. Being in Jacksonville is a huge city. I know it's the largest city in the contiguous United States. We have officers all around in every different town and neighborhood. So not having a training like this, like before Copper, I can't believe it's taking this long to have something like this, especially for our officers that are in the community the most. This has been such an amazing thing. I mean, we noticed the difference from right after we first took it. We used actually a hurricane. We were all here. It was during one of the hurricanes that we had to spend a couple nights here. We used that to kind of kick off the training. We had everybody here and we had some extra time. But the very next meeting we had, there was a palpable difference in the types of conversations we were having as a group when people were going out to these calls. So I can't say enough about it. For $35 for 3 years, it's amazing. It is really great, and it's easy for the staff or the officers to have time to do. But again, they all loved it, and one of our senior officers, Officer Duran, is on the call too. So I don't know, Sarah, if you're able to, can you tell a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Sarah Duran. I'm officer with ACPS, not Michael Berker. But yeah, actually, at the same time I was doing this training during the hurricane, I actually had a case occur. I went to a call. This was, I think, literally the night before the hurricane was hitting. And a man, and it's a neighborhood that we're in quite often, low poverty, or high poverty. And he had 2 dogs outside tied up. And, I told him that the hurricane's coming, the dogs can't be out here. And there was a little back and forth with it, and we ended the call. And he actually called me 10 minutes later and told me that he had thought about it, and he just had never really thought about that the dogs shouldn't be outside in hurricane weather. And for me, that's crazy. that's basic knowledge for me, but obviously me and this man have totally different lives. We grew up in totally different neighborhoods, and it really is just something that just, you know, a simple conversation, a simple education can really open up somebody's eyes to what appears so common knowledge to us.
Michael, somebody asked what was the name of the program again?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm sure we can get a link in there. But it's Care Ready and it's the copper. So I think there's bronze and copper and there's Vet Ready. But yeah, I mean, just bronze is super important. Our whole staff has taken bronze, copper. We have one vet; she's taken Vet Ready. But again, I think Dr. Luna hit it on the head, especially right now. This is a super important topic, and being able to broach or really like have that dialogue, talk about this. It just started so many different conversations that like I knew the training was going to be helpful, but I really didn't know just how helpful until all the questions that I was receiving afterwards and the different conversations and how we just bring it into every single conversation we have with the public now. It's just been a lot of help. So yeah, Care Ready Copper.
Thanks so
Thank you
much,
both
y'all.
so much for that. Oh, sorry, Lucy.
No, please.
I really appreciate that. Great endorsement. And I think it's a good lead in to actually our presentation today. So if anyone else has national updates, would you mind just posting them in the chat? I really appreciate it. And again, thank you to Dr. Luna and thank you to Jacksonville. Okay, you guys rock. Lucy, over to you.
Yeah, so like she said, there's a great segue into our topic for the day. Today we're joined by Kevin Morris, Leanna Moss, and Kaleigh O'Reilly with the University of Denver Institute for Human Animal Connection. The research team is going to present the finalized and updated results of a recent study on patterns and trends in animal control and field services interactions in the U.S. And I'm not going to go ahead and read the whole blurb or whatever. Y'all read it, and that's why you joined us today. So we're going to go ahead and hand it off to this amazing team and the research and all the facts behind the feelings of all the work that we do. So take it away, whichever one wants to take it first.
Put the slides up, Liana. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first time we've presented final findings of this study, so we're excited to present it to you and have a conversation about it both today but ongoing in the forum as we try to think about what the implications of the findings are. So I'm Kevin, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Institute first, but then I'm going to hand it off to Liana and Kaleigh because it's their work. So can I have the next slide? So if you're not familiar with the Institute for Human Animal Connection, or IHAC as it's fondly referred to as, we have the mission of advancing knowledge and practice in the field of human animal environment interactions through innovative and ethical education and research. Our education programs include a suite of professional development certificates that you can take online. I encourage you to check those out on our website. And then our research broad portfolio fits into two categories: human-animal interactions and mental health, which includes work in with incarcerated individuals and dog training programs. We recently launched a study of service dogs for PTSD, and we do quite a bit of work on youth development. This research we're going to show today fits within our human-animal interactions and equity portfolio, which includes a lot of access to care work that we do with HSUS and PetSmart charities. In addition to this work, none of this work would happen without generous support from our funders, including Maddie's Fund. It wouldn't happen without a lot of input from our graduate research students, including Michelle Hansen, who did a lot of the GIS mapping that you're going to see at the core of the study today. And it certainly wouldn't have happened without 5 animal control organizations providing all of their case data for us over an 8-year span anonymously through the university. Next slide. So a bit of background to this study. There's been very little work done on quantitative studies of animal control, how animal control interacts with their communities. And it builds on a portfolio of work here at IHAC that includes access to care that I mentioned with Pets for Life and PetSmart Charities. We just published a paper on our Pets for Life as One Health study. If you're interested in getting a copy of that paper, just shoot me an email. We, in 2020, published a commentary on the need for moving to more of a support community engagement model from purely punishment in animal law enforcement, and started to work toward that goal with a qualitative study where we interviewed 30 animal control officers, trying to understand their perspectives on how they engage with their communities. That has led to this large quantitative study that we're going to show today. And then there are upcoming studies, including one with the community members themselves in communities that we have identified as highly impacted by animal control in our studies. So broadly, this work is it's connected to systemic inequities that we see throughout animal welfare, but even more broadly, this work has direct connection to the policing system here in the US. Next slide. So our underlying question in this portfolio of research is, how do animal law enforcement agencies engage with the communities they serve? And we have been looking at this specifically through relationships between the number of cases, the types of cases, the outcomes, and the demographics of the communities that are in these jurisdictions. Next. So what you're going to see today is what we call our animal law enforcement patterns and trends study. We are going to be showing you aggregate data across 5 organizations, over 1 million cases. We have analyzed these data in 2 different ways. We're going to highlight the weighted analysis today because it's just a little bit easier to present, but we also have a fancy statistical model that accounts for a wide variety of variables. The important thing here is that the 2 analyses arrive at the same conclusions. So because this is aggregate data across multiple organizations, it's important to just keep in mind that there are ranges for all of this, and what we're showing is the average or the median in some cases. So this is it's an analysis through a systemic lens. It's a national study, and Kaleigh's going to tell you a little bit more about the data we analyzed and how we analyzed it. Take it away, Kaleigh.
Thank you, Kevin. So we're going to chat really quick about social vulnerability index, because this is really at the center of understanding many of our analyses that you'll see today. So social vulnerability index was created by the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And they define social vulnerability as the potential negative effects on communities caused by external stresses on human health. So this index was originally developed to help local officials identify communities within their jurisdiction that might need more support before, during, and after disasters. However, it has also been utilized in a variety of other fields, such as public health, animal welfare, and policing. So the way that social vulnerability index works is that they score a census tract on a scale from 0 to 1, and that score can be calculated down to the 0.001 level. The way this is interpreted is that the closer to 0 the score is, the less vulnerable the community, or the less vulnerable the census tract. And the closer to 1, the more vulnerable the census tract. Next slide, please. So social vulnerability index scores are informed by a total of 16 different census variables that contribute to 4 domains, which are socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, housing type and transportation, and housing characteristics. So we have a total SVI score, and then we can also get individual SVI scores for each of these 4 domains. And you can interpret those 4 domains similarly to how you would interpret the total SVI score. So for example, socioeconomic status, the closer to 1 a census tract's socioeconomic SVI score is, the more socioeconomically vulnerable that community is. For race ethnicity, this would be the closer to 1 the census tract is scored for this variable, the more racially and ethnically diverse that census tract is. In conclusion, what to take away from this is that the more vulnerable a community, or the factors that contribute to higher vulnerability in a community, are low socioeconomic status, high racial and ethnic diversity, high percentages of young and older populations, and high housing density. And further, we are using social vulnerability index in our study in order to understand what the demographics of the communities are and the trends that are associated with the cases taking place there. So a little bit more about the data we received. Again, this was all provided anonymously to us from 5 different organizations within 4 distinct US Census regions. We asked organizations to transfer 8 years of data to us spanning from 2015 to 2022 that included all cases across those years, the outcomes associated with those cases, and the address of where the case took place. Just before cleaning, we had over 1.2 million animal control cases. However, after receiving the data, there was quite a bit of cleaning that we needed to do, and that involved standardizing all the various different codes and acronyms that the different organizations use into 17 distinct case types and 20 outcome types. And those categories were created with experts in the field, including the Pets for Life team and animal control officers and organizations. Other aspects of the cleaning process included removing any wildlife and livestock calls, as these kinds of cases were not serviced by all of the organizations that provided data for the study, whereas cats and dogs were. So those cases were removed in order for consistency. So after all of that cleaning took place, we had just over 1 million cases for analysis. And then the next step in our process involved the utilization of geographic information systems, which allowed our team to match all animal control cases to the associated SVI score of the community or census tract where that case took place. After mapping, we ended up with data across almost 17,000 census tracts, and the mean SVI score across all of those census tracts was 0.5, which is right in the middle of that 0 to 1 SVI spectrum. And this is really important because it shows that before we do any analysis with social vulnerability index or the animal control data that we have, our overall data set is equally represented across the SVI spectrum. Some other interesting facts for you about the total jurisdictional area that was mapped across all the organizations is that the population served was approximately 9 million, which is a population greater than the entire state of New Jersey or Virginia. And the entire jurisdictional area was approximately 10,500 square miles, which is roughly the same size as the state of Massachusetts. I'm going to pass it to Liana now to go through the analyses of this data.
Thanks, Kaleigh. So the first question we're asking in order to address our research questions is there a relationship between case volume and SVI? So what I'm showing you here on this graph, all of those blue dots are census tracts. So we have about 16,611 census tracts represented here, with just a few outliers that were removed for analysis. Our x-axis is total SVI, again on that range from 0 to 1, with 0 being the least vulnerable and 1 being the most vulnerable. On our y-axis, or our vertical axis, we see cases per 1,000 people. So we did control for this, the possibility that certain census tracts have a varying degree of population in their census tracts. So for all years, for all of our organizations, if cases were evenly distributed across social vulnerability index, what we would see are 50% of cases occurring in census tracts between 0 and 0.5, and 50% of cases occurring in census tracts between 0.5 and 1. And what you can see here are our quartile bars that are to show you what it would look like if it were evenly distributed. What we see in reality with the data we have is that our median shifts from 0.5, if it were evenly distributed, to 0.68, meaning that 50% of cases are occurring in census tracts with a SVI total score between 0.68 and 1. And 25% of cases are occurring in census tracts with an SVI of between 0.85 and 1. So what we see here is a skew of where cases are occurring towards the more vulnerable communities or the more vulnerable census tracts. And with the benefit of SVI, we can dig deeper into not just what the total SVI is, but what are the strongest drivers of the skew between case volume and SVI, because we have those domains. So what I'm showing you here in the black box is what I just showed you on our graph. We have total SVI in that 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile, and we see that shift and that skew toward the more vulnerable communities. If you look at the next black box, we will just be taking a look at just socioeconomic status. And what we see here is that socioeconomic status really closely mirrors what we're seeing in total SVI, almost exactly, which is that the cases are skewed towards the more vulnerable communities for socioeconomic status. As we follow that black box to the right, we look at race and ethnicity minority status. And what's really important here is that we see our median shift to 0.87. So again, evenly distributed would be 0.5. It shifts to 0.87, meaning 50% of cases are occurring in census tracts with a race and ethnicity SVI between 0.87 and 1. And a whopping 25% of cases are occurring in census tracts with a race and ethnicity minority status SVI between 0.95 and 1. So 25% of cases are occurring in census tracts with the 5% highest of folks there living with the highest racial diversity. We looked at household characteristics and housing and transportation. And what you will see is that it very closely aligns with what you would expect if it were evenly distributed across SVI. So we don't see a big skew based on these domains. So what we just established is that for case volume, race and ethnicity minority status is the strongest driver of that skew, with socioeconomic status being the second strongest driver. And I want to note that other research has shown that race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status are linked. But what we often hear from folks in the animal control field is that I just go where I'm called. I just go where the cases occur. I don't choose where I'm going. So we decided to dig further and ask, is there a relationship between SVI and outcomes? So is there a difference in what people are experiencing based on where they live once the officers get there? So Kaleigh highlighted for you that we had to clean our case types and our outcomes into standardized buckets. And if anyone's looked at shelter data before, or animal control data, you know that there is not a lot of standardization. So that took a lot of effort. But we decided to take our outcomes and organize them into 3 distinct categories: punitive, non-punitive, and neither. And these were organized based on the letter of the law. So when you think punitive, think penalty or punishment, and non-punitive would be non-penalty or non-punishment. And what we start out with is we actually have more non-punitive cases, just by the numbers, occurring in this data set than punitive outcomes. But we did have to create this neither category. If anyone here knows how hard it is to find a stray dog when you've gotten called out for one, it's really difficult. So there are a lot of unable to make contact or locate outcomes in these data, and that's neither punitive nor non-punitive. So those were removed for analysis for this part, but that does account for almost 25% of outcomes. So we came to this conundrum that if we already know that there are more cases occurring in communities that have census tracts that are higher SVI or more vulnerable, if I just gave you the number of punitive outcomes and the number of non-punitive outcomes, they'd both be higher for these communities that are more vulnerable. It wouldn't really tell us anything. So we knew we had to establish a relationship between punitive and non-punitive cases. So we created this punitive, non-punitive outcome ratio, where we take the number of punitive cases per 1,000 people, so again, controlling for population, for every census tract, for every organization, for every year. And we divide it by the number of non-punitive cases per 1,000 people, for every census tract, for every organization, for every year. And that gives us this outcome ratio. And we know fractions, but the higher our numerator or our punitive cases at the top, that higher that fraction is going to be, the bigger that fraction is going to be. So we are going to analyze SVI using quartiles: low, low, medium, medium, high, and high. And that's what's outlined as best practice in the research. And what we're going to do as well is use that low quartile as a sort of reference or control for the other quartiles. And again, that's what's best practice in analyzing SVI. So what we have here is for all years, all organizations, this is the mean punitive, non-punitive outcome ratio by SVI total. So I have my 4 quartiles here with the low, low, medium, medium, high, and high, and that mean punitive, non-punitive ratio. When we look at the difference between the low and the high quartile, we see that the high quartile is 1.35 times greater than the low. So our most vulnerable communities are experiencing the most punitive outcomes. And even when we look at our medium high quartile, we see that it's 1.29 times greater than the low, again indicating that even our medium high quartile are experiencing more punitive outcomes than the low. So again, we get to investigate further that what are the strongest drivers of this skew that we see between outcome ratio and SVI. This skew that we've outlined, that the more vulnerable communities are experiencing more punitive outcomes. Okay, a lot of numbers here. Bear with me. We'll walk through it. So we have total SVI in the black box. That's what I just showed you in my graph. And we see that the low quartile, or the high quartile is 1.35 times greater than the low. As we follow that black box to the right and we look at just socioeconomic status, similar to what we saw with case volume and SVI, it mirrors almost exactly total SVI. So we do see a statistically significant skew, that there are more punitive outcomes experienced by communities in the higher SVI categories for socioeconomic status. So more vulnerable in socioeconomic status are experiencing more punitive outcomes. As you follow that black box again to the right, and we're looking at just race and ethnicity minority status, we see that that high quartile is similarly high as the total SVI and socioeconomic status. But what's truly of note here is our low and our low medium quartiles, which are statistically significantly lower than our high quartile, meaning that folks that are in the highest race and ethnicity minority status SVI census tracts are experiencing statistically significantly more punitive outcomes than low. And as a reminder, the lowest quartile for SVI, the lower the SVI for race and ethnicity minority status, the higher the percentage of white non-Hispanic people are living in that community. So those folks are experiencing statistically significantly less punitive outcomes than the folks in the census tracts with the highest percentage of folks who are Black and brown. When we look at household characteristics and housing and transportation, we actually find that these are not statistically significantly different from each other. So the inequity here is not statistically significant. So the primary driver of this inequity in outcomes is race and ethnicity minority status, with socioeconomic status being the secondary driver. So Kevin mentioned that what we just showed you was our weighted analysis, where all 5 organizations account for 20% of the data. We also ran what's called a binomial logistic regression model, which is a complex mathematical model that we certainly don't do by hand. We use a mathematical system. And it's our unweighted analysis, where every case contributes equally. And again, we have over 1 million cases. Through this model, we're able to control for multiple variables, including case type, outcome type, year, organization, and SVI. So oftentimes we hear stereotypes in animal welfare of certain cases are more common in certain communities or certain outcomes are more common. We control for that. And what we find is that the results are consistent with the weighted analysis that I just showed you, which is that the likelihood of receiving a punitive outcome increases as total SVI increases, as well as when all 4 SVI domains increase. Final takeaways, because we threw a lot of things at you. The number of animal control cases is skewed toward the more vulnerable or high SVI communities. People living in more vulnerable communities or that higher SVI communities are experiencing more punitive outcomes. And race and ethnicity SVI domain is the strongest driver across both of these. Now, I have a few things to note for folks. One huge thing here is that although these organizations are anonymous, these are the organizations that agreed to provide their data to us. So they already are having a little bit of a progressive lean because they agreed to provide their data. We had many conversations with other organizations across the country who either did not want to or weren't able to provide their data to us. So that's really important when we're thinking about what this may look like if it was a sample of a random group of animal control organizations. Another thing to note is that many of these organizations had a relationship or have a relationship with HSUS Pets for Life program, which also could indicate a lean towards more progressive programming and potentially changes in the trends in their data, especially if Pets for Life has been involved for many years. And one thing that has come about in the last 2 weeks that we think it's very important to note is that the CDC ATSDR SVI data is no longer publicly available online due to recent executive orders. So now when we go to look at SVI data, what we get are these warnings. The page is not found or is unable to be accessed. So luckily, we have all of the data we need. We've finished our data analysis. We have our SBI data, but this really important tool, especially potentially for future studies, right now is tied up in executive order restrictions and is no longer publicly available. So we will follow that along and see how that progresses. Next steps. So we're really excited. We just finished data analysis and our plan is to publish this research in a peer-reviewed research journal in 2025. We also will be presenting at HSUS Expo in Las Vegas, and we would love for y'all to come watch our presentation. We will be presenting on Friday. And what's interesting is we'll be presenting this data as well as data from another study we did on community engagement perspectives from officers in a survey, a nationally representative survey we've done. So we'd love for you to come join us there. We'll also be presenting at other conferences in 2025. In addition, we will be providing individualized reports for these study organizations. So they will get a full comprehensive report of just their organization, and they can do with that what they will. If they'd like to use that and take that to their community, if they would like to take that to their board of directors or their public health department to advocate for change, we would love to see that, but that is theirs and their choice to do with that what they will. And finally, as I mentioned, we're finishing up a quantitative study on community engagement in animal control, and that will fit in really nicely with this study to hopefully explain some of the trends that we're seeing. So thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it, and I'm going to stop share.
Amazing. Thank y'all so much for all of that mathing, doing all the math on the work of it, because as I mentioned before, when we're doing this type of work and being out there in the community and that kind of thing, it's always great to have the receipts on things and kind of see that we're not just going crazy, that we're not alone and isolated in these things, that it is like some pervasive themes and stuff like that that are quantifiable and everything. So thanks so much for doing all the fun math, because I can't even do a pivot table, to be honest with you, but that's okay. That's why we divide and conquer this fun stuff. So yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and highlight a couple of the questions that were asked in the chat. So y'all can address them. Thank you so much for commenting on the CDC order thing. I know that was kind of like one of the things that a lot of us kind of take a look at on guiding the work of things, but unfortunately, yeah, we'll see how things kind of pan out and things we can't control. But is there any research along these lines being done in Europe, especially along lines of access to care and equity issues? I'm not sure how international this information goes or whatever. And I'm sure, every country and every situation is different. But if you guys have any information on that.
None that I'm aware of. Leon or Kaleigh, have you come across any international one?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing as comprehensive as this. I've seen like lower scale ones on like maybe just cruelty or neglect or something like that. But
well, I'm sure that, y'all can go ahead and send your fun formulas out to folks that need it somewhere else out in Europe and in other countries, trying to dig into some receipts on things. Will the slides be in the Maddie's forum? I believe that they're added afterwards along with a YouTube recording, correct? For each community conversation. Yeah, what is the basis of getting a punishment versus not getting punished? Maybe it's nothing to do with race. Maybe those people are just worse to the animals earning a punishment. And if y'all want to speak to that, I'm happy to go ahead and throw my 2 cents in, but you guys are the pros on this one. So
yeah, Kevin, would you like to tap in on that?
You can take a run at this.
Okay. No, this is a really important question, and I appreciate the person who shared that question with us. Yeah, there obviously are a lot of factors that could go into why an officer makes a particular decision with an outcome, whether it's non-punitive or punitive. What's really important that I want to share with these data, so we have over 1 million cases, and we analyzed the outcomes for the same type of case types. So for example, if you look at just cruelty or just neglect, and you look at those cases that are occurring in low SVI communities and those that are occurring in high SVI communities. And when you control for everything, what we're still seeing is for the same case types, folks in the more vulnerable or the higher SVI communities are experiencing more punitive outcomes than for the same case type at the low SVI. And obviously there's a range of what we could call like outliers, but when you have a volume such as 1 million cases, these trends are what we would consider statistically significant. So I think there's a lot of things at play here. And Kevin, I don't know if you want to touch on that anymore. But what I would say is from our data, what we're seeing is that these are the aggregate trends with statistical significance.
I think what is important is this ratio of punitive to non-punitive outcomes, because it really does start to get to intent. It's not just that there are more cases in these communities, it's that officers are giving more punitive outcomes. To differentiate your question, we don't have the specific data to say whether these communities have worse offenses that require more punitive outcomes, but it seems to be equally explainable as an intent by the officers themselves.
Yeah, and I think that kind of segues into a couple of the next questions. Is there bias training for animal control or animal well-being professionals? I know earlier there was some discussion about the care bronze and copper packages, where they kind of go into some really amazing sort of information and training and stuff like that. If you want to go ahead and drop that in the chat, or if anybody wants to speak on that. And then also, what role does staffing play in the type of cases handled? Again, I can always speak to things like that, but you know, I'll leave it to y'all since it's your conversation. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, I assume that maybe what you're touching on is like what kind of case types an animal control agency has capacity to go out for. Stop me if I'm going down the wrong lane. But what I'll say is what we did see is in 2020, which if you will remember, we had a pretty significant public health issue, which was a pandemic, which drastically changed animal sheltering, animal welfare, animal control functioning, and functioning of a lot of our society. What we saw was a significant drop in the number of cases that occurred in 2020. So our case volume went down significantly. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of organizations stopped going out on stray in that large calls or cases, that they just didn't have the staffing or the capacity to go out on every single stray dog or stray cat case. But that would be probably the most significant thing we noticed across the organizations as a change in what kind of case types they're looking at. And I'll say then it popped back up after 2020. So it would be that 1 year. Kaleigh, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, the only other thing I was thinking about is like whether or not your organization has the capacity or ability to provide resources instead of as an alternative to maybe a more penalty outcome, as you will. And if you don't, how can your organization work towards how do we provide resources to fix, to build a fence maybe, or get a doghouse outside, or maybe talk to the owners why their dog might need veterinary care. Can we provide vouchers, things like that? And those are resources that if you don't have those, what are your other options? So I think increasing the ability to provide resources as an alternative is something that staffing might have an influence on as well.
Yeah, I would just add that, there are a lot of interconnected systems working here. It's not just officers going out and being biased. It's a lack of access to resources in these communities, whether it's veterinary care or just basic pet supplies. Systemic injustice that has gone on for decades and decades is playing out here too. So it's complicated. So it's hard to come up with a single answer like, oh, you just need some anti-bias training. It requires a lot of systemic changes that that the animal welfare world needs to be pushing for, in addition to broader concepts. I mean, this is not so different than what we're seeing in conversations with our colleagues who work in more policing types of analyses, that there is this over enforcement versus over
differential spending versus
Yeah.
differential response.
Yeah. So it's not a new thing, but what we did bring to it, I think that's different, is this punitive outcome analysis.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. Yeah, I think that was it for questions. And then they'll go ahead and have the forum for this week's conversation on there, again with the recording, the slides, and then all like follow-up conversations, so folks can go ahead and ask our panelists any questions, or add any data to just kind of keep building the conversation and the community behind that. But yeah, so thanks so much again for y'all's time and for your commitment to getting all the receipts, putting all the stuff together. Really amazing to, like I said, kind of divide and conquer, the work and getting that information together, and so that we have, some facts to go by and seeing like how we can go ahead and make changes organizationally in our communities to help more people, help more pets and such. So thanks so much again. And yeah, thanks so much for your presentation. And I think that's it, unless Mary has anything she wants to wrap up.
No, I just want to thank you, Lucy, for a great job hosting today, and thank the IHAC team for being here. So I hope everybody has a good week. Be safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.